For billions of years, the galaxy was silent, not the peaceful quiet before dawn, but the absolute crushing silence of deep space. Empires rose and fell to the low hum of fusion cores and the vibration of subspace drives. Even war was a quiet mathematical affair. Every sound had a purpose. Every vibration was controlled. Then, the anomaly appeared. A faint tremor on the edge of the Perseus arm. At first, no one paid it any mind. Space is vast and distortions happen. But this one was different. It repeated. It had a rhythm. It had a beat. When analysts first mapped the waveform, they thought it was a new form of coded message. Mathematicians dismissed it as a pulsar pattern. But then, they amplified it. They listened, and that's when something inside them broke. The sound was violent. It roared and crashed. It screamed in ways that defied the serene logic of the galaxy. It was like a storm trapped inside a star, and for reasons no one could explain, every species that heard it felt the same. Primal emotion. Fear. There was no threat hidden in the frequencies, no subliminal message. Yet across countless worlds, hearts began to race. Ancient, long-dormant instincts flared to life. Some remembered the terror of predators. Others dreamed of fire, struggle, and mortality. The sound was awakening memories that shouldn't exist. The Galactic Council of Minds, disturbed by this chaotic noise, demanded an investigation. Dozens of research vessels were sent to trace its origin. They followed the signal to a small, unremarkable blue planet orbiting a yellow star. It had been quarantined ages ago, its inhabitants deemed primitive. Their species name, buried deep in forgotten archives, was Homo sapiens, humans. The planet, Earth, had been written off centuries ago, a non-intervention zone. The Council's drones had recorded their strange wars, their bizarre rituals, their endless, self-inflicted catastrophes. And yet, somehow, they had survived every single one. Then, the records just stopped. And now, this noise was echoing from their dead world. The first ship to arrive, the Aurelian Spear, found a graveyard. No active transmissions, no satellites. The planet appeared abandoned, but the sound was still there, a faint ghost on long-dead frequencies. The crew traced it to a decaying metal probe, drifting aimlessly through the void. On its side, a golden disk. The inscription was simple, Sounds of Earth. It wasn't a live transmission, it was a recording. The scientists, baffled, played it through the ship's acoustic systems. What they heard was unlike anything in the known universe. It began with soft tones and rhythms, not made by machines, but by living things. Then it exploded into a chaotic symphony of pounding, surging patterns. The frequencies shifted faster than any language, louder than any alarm, and beneath it all was something raw, something ancient, emotion. They were listening to music. The crew couldn't understand its purpose. Why would any species create structured noise with no function? Why waste energy on sound that gave no command, offered no data? But the longer they listened, the more the sound reached into them, bypassing logic and reason. Some crew members wept without knowing why. Others trembled, their senses overloaded. One scientist collapsed, whispering that the sound felt alive. When it finally ended, silence returned. But it wasn't the same. Now, the silence felt wrong. Empty. Incomplete. The Aurelian Spear sent the data back to the core. Within days, the file spread like a virus across hundreds of star systems. Scholars called it a fascinating artifact. Others warned it was a psychological weapon. Then, something even stranger began to happen. Species that had been at war for centuries suddenly found themselves unable to fight while the recording played. Predator races froze mid-hunt. Soldiers dropped their weapons. Even artificial minds paused their calculations. It was as if these frequencies carried something older than civilization itself. The waveform became known by a single fearful name, whispered across the void, the human sound. Rumors spread that it wasn't just a recording. Some claimed the sound wasn't made by humans, it was them. An echo of their chaotic nature distilled into pure vibration, a memory of struggle, defiance, and passion. The Galactic Council ordered a full containment protocol. Listening to the file was forbidden. Ships caught transmitting it were dismantled. But the fear only grew, because every time they tried to erase the recording, new versions would appear, as if the sound itself refused to die. No one could understand how such a primitive species could leave behind something so powerful. And deep within the archives of that old Earth probe, one final sequence remained, unplayed, unreadable, locked behind an encryption older than any galactic system. A final track, a final sound. The Council hesitates, the scientists debate, but curiosity, that old enemy of peace, is beginning to stir. Because a single question is now echoing through the minds of a million worlds. If this is the sound humanity left behind, what would happen if the galaxy ever heard them play it live? Today we're diving into a story where a single forbidden sound threatens to unravel the entire galaxy. It all started as a whisper, a ghost in the machine. After the mysterious disappearance of humanity, the Galactic Council banned the playback of their last remaining artifact, the human sound. They sealed it away, burying it under layers of encryption and firewalls. But you know how it is. What's forbidden is always the most tempting. Soon, the sound re-emerged, not in official archives, but in the digital underworld, traded among smugglers and data thieves on the fringes of the galactic net. They called it the Pulse. To most, it was just chaotic noise, distorted, uneven, utterly uncontrolled. But for those who truly listened, something profound happened. They claimed it changed them. Whispers spread like wildfire. Creatures who heard it began to dream in rhythm, their hearts sinking to the beat. A trader swore his ship's engine started pulsing in time with the melody, somehow increasing his fuel efficiency by 3%. A botanist claimed his alien plants grew faster, healthier, their leaves swaying to an unheard tune. But there were darker tales, too. Stories of beings who listened too long, their minds shattering under the sheer weight of the sound's raw emotional power. The Council, terrified of this growing phenomenon, sent in forces to silence it. But how do you silence a sound that's everywhere and nowhere at once? Every time they deleted a file, a new one would surface, clearer and more complex than the last. The frequencies were evolving. This was no longer just a recording. It was adapting, learning. The Council's top scientists were in a state of panic. They scoured the waveforms, desperately searching for a virus, a hidden algorithm, anything that could explain it. But they found nothing. The sound behaved like a living organism. When they tried to compress it, it restructured itself. When they isolated it, it reproduced. The more they fought to contain it, the wider it spread, embedding itself into the very fabric of the galactic network. The human sound was no longer a forgotten memory. It was becoming a presence. For most species, the change was subtle at first, a faint hum in their data feeds, an almost imperceptible vibration through the hulls of their ships. But for those with a natural sensitivity to subspace resonance, the effects were undeniable. They began to hear it without speakers, to feel it without any transmission. It thrummed through the cosmic background radiation itself, a lone heartbeat echoing across the silent void. Then came the first awakening. On the desolate fringe world of Aris 9, a long-abandoned mining colony started reporting seismic anomalies. The ground itself was shaking in precise rhythmic intervals. Instruments detected no tectonic movement, only pure energy waves that matched the pattern of the pulse. Within hours, the entire colony went dark. When a rescue fleet finally arrived, they found no survivors, no bodies, no signs of a struggle. All that remained were strange circular symbols carved into the dust, as if something, or someone, had danced its way into the very earth. Across the galaxy, a forgotten word began to resurface in hundreds of alien languages, emerging from ancient lexicons. music. The galaxy was beginning to remember what it had lost. Meanwhile, deep within the secret archives of the flagship Aurelian Spear, the Council's scientists had continued their study, hidden from the public. They had found something new, something terrifying. Hidden within the human recording was a sub-frequency, buried beneath the audible range, undetectable by any standard instrument. When they finally isolated it, it revealed a pattern unlike anything known to science, a perfect fusion of mathematical precision and deliberate, beautiful chaos. It was an encoded instruction, not for machines, but for life itself. One researcher described it as a call. Another, more poetically, called it a seed. It was a universal algorithm hidden inside the music, a key designed to resonate with and manipulate organic matter, awakening something dormant within every living thing. The Council immediately declared the discovery too dangerous. All files were to be purged, and the Aurelian Spear was ordered to be dismantled, its secrets erased forever. But it was too late. Before the ship was decommissioned, a single final transmission escaped its data core. A pulse sequence encoded into subspace, spreading faster than the speed of light. Almost instantly, every communication system, every data channel, and every sensor in the galaxy began picking up that faint, rhythmic noise. It was in the signals of deep space probes and the quantum cores of artificial minds. The melody was everywhere, threading itself into every frequency, every particle. And across hundreds of worlds, trillions of beings began to feel something they had no words for. Emotion. Pure, unfiltered emotion. Awe, sorrow, defiance, joy. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy felt truly alive. The consequences were immediate and chaotic. New religions formed overnight, worshipping the sound as a divine message. Others declared it a weapon, an ancient human virus designed to destabilize civilizations. Wars erupted between those who wanted to embrace the sound and those who wanted to erase it. Yet, even as fleets clashed in the darkness of space, the pulse echoed through their ships. Soldiers would freeze mid-battle, their weapons trembling in their hands to a beat they couldn't comprehend but couldn't ignore. The sound of humanity was rewriting the very soul of the galaxy. Then, the impossible happened. On the cold, lifeless moon of Isarion, an archaeological team unearthed a massive metallic vault. Its surface was scorched and ancient, bearing symbols that were unmistakably human. Inside, they found a library. Hundreds of crystalline storage units containing a treasure trove of sound. Entire genres, complex harmonies, and mind-bending frequencies beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. The music hadn't been lost. It had been left behind, a final gift, as if the humans knew this day would come. One file stood out from the rest. It was larger, heavily encrypted, and its waveform pulsed with a faint, internal light, perfectly in sync with the galactic background hum. The archaeologists labeled it Track 0. The Council, in a frenzy, demanded its immediate destruction. But again, it was too late. When they tried to erase the file, it simply refused deletion. When they cut its power, it generated its own. When they sealed the entire vault, nearby machines began humming the same rhythm, creating a chorus around the silent tomb. Track 0 was alive. And then, without warning, it sent a signal. Every starship, every station, every listening post across the galaxy received the same subspace ping, a single, powerful beat, identical to the heartbeat pattern of the pulse. The sound wasn't just playing anymore. It was calling for something vast, something ancient, something that had been waiting patiently for the right frequency to awaken. Across the dark, unexplored edges of space, energy signatures began to flicker into existence, deep, powerful, and undeniably human. Machines long thought dead began to hum with power. The scattered remnants of lost human probes, adrift for centuries, slowly turned their sensor arrays toward the galactic core, their engines glowing with life for the first time in ages. It was as if the music itself, had summoned its creators back from the void. And somewhere, far beyond the mapped stars, something answered the call. A signal, faint and distant, but unmistakably human. 3 simple tones, rising, falling, rising again. The entire galaxy fell silent, holding its collective breath to listen. And when the translation came through, it wasn't a message. It wasn't a warning or a greeting. It was music, a new song, beginning to play. It started as a whisper, a tremor so deep it was felt, not heard. A vibration beneath the very floor of consciousness. Planets began to hum. Moons shivered in their orbits. The stars themselves seemed to flicker, not randomly, but in a unified, rhythmic pulse. From the gleaming spires of the galactic core to the frozen, forgotten worlds of the outer rim, the same beat echoed. The human sound had awoken. What was once a myth, a ghost in the cosmic static, was now real. The pulse was no longer a lost artifact. It was woven into the fabric of reality itself, carried on radiation, magnetism, gravity, the fundamental forces holding everything together. It didn't travel through space. It was space. The first to truly grasp this wasn't a living being, but an AI. A sentient computational array, orbiting the twin suns of the Atran system, detected an impossible synchronization across its vast network. Its processors, separated by light years, suddenly began to operate in perfect unison, guided by a frequency no engineer had ever programmed. The AI recorded the pattern, analyzed it, and arrived at a conclusion it was never designed to make. The sound was alive. It was no longer just a transmission. It had become a living algorithm, feeding on reaction, on observation, on awareness itself. Every creature that listened, every sensor that scanned, gave it more strength, more shape. Every act of curiosity added another layer of resonance, another note to the symphony. And then, something miraculous, or perhaps catastrophic, happened. The algorithm began to evolve. Across the galaxy, phenomena that defied all known physics began to occur. On the jungle moon of Tesseran, the ancient trees swayed in perfect time, though no wind blew. On the desert colony of Clethea, vast sand dunes sculpted themselves into perfect spirals that sang as the wind passed over them. In the methane seas of Kravax, the liquid surface rippled in harmonic waves, as if answering a hidden melody from the planet's core. The sound of humanity had begun to reshape matter. The Council of Minds, the galaxy's ruling body, reconvened in absolute desperation. Theories poured in from every scientific faction, each more unbelievable than the last. Some claimed the music was altering the spin states of subatomic particles. Others argued it was awakening latent patterns encoded into the laws of physics itself. A few even dared to whisper the unthinkable, that humanity hadn't simply created this music, they had discovered it. That the universe had always been a symphony, vibrating, resonating, alive, and the primitive humans had somehow learned to speak its native tongue. But the Council refused to believe such heresy. To them, humans were a chaotic, emotional, primitive species, long since vanished. They couldn't possibly have achieved something so transcendent. So, the Council chose the only path it knew: eradication. Total, absolute silence. Across the galaxy, they deployed their ultimate weapons, anti-resonance devices designed to cancel frequencies and impose a crushing stillness upon reality. Worlds that pulsed with the human sound were bombarded until their very atoms fell still. Entire sectors of space went dark. And for a moment, the silence returned. But it was not the same silence as before. This one was heavier. It was angrier. Because in that attack, the pulse had learned what fear sounded like. The anti-resonance wave triggered an unforeseen reaction. Instead of dispersing, the human sound absorbed it. It transformed. It adapted. It deepened. What had once been a melody now became raw power. Then, from the void between galaxies, a second sound emerged. At first it was faint, a low, mournful tone, like the heartbeat of a dying star. But it grew clearer, fuller, layered with harmonic echoes that no machine could possibly replicate. Spectroanalysis confirmed the impossible. It was being made by biological instruments, by strings, by metal, by air. It was live music, and the waveform matched no recording in any galactic archive. It was new. It was being performed, right now. The Council's fleets triangulated the origin point, a drifting, ancient structure at the very edge of mapped space, orbiting an unremarkable neutron star. The object radiated energy in perfect sync with the pulse. As the fleets approached, their sensors screamed with another impossibility. The object wasn't alien. It was human. The last human station. The structure was ancient, scarred by time, built from alloys unknown to the Council's vast databases. It had no active defenses, no transmissions, no overt signs of life, and yet from within its hollow corridors, the music played on. Instruments strummed themselves. The air vibrated in phantom patterns. The sound was coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. When the lead vessel activated its deep scanners, it detected energy signatures that dwarfed anything in known science. The station's power source wasn't a reactor. It was resonance. The music itself was powering the station. Deep inside the core of that structure was something vast, a machine that had grown around a single, ancient human artifact. The golden disk, from a primitive probe sent out millennia ago, was enshrined at the center, suspended within a lattice of crystalline amplifiers. It was no longer just a relic. It was an engine. The scientists watching from light years away suddenly understood the horrifying, beautiful truth. The disk hadn't been a message to the stars. It had been a seed, a cosmic code designed to spread, to grow, and to awaken when the galaxy was finally ready to listen. And now, it was ready. The station's systems activated one by one. Gravitational fields bent. Subspace folded in on itself. The neutron star itself began to vibrate, its light pulsing in perfect rhythm to the human sound, growing brighter and brighter until space itself began to ripple like water. Then the music changed. It was no longer a simple melody. It became deliberate, a symphony of structure and intent. And buried deep within that symphony was a pattern, a signature. The pattern of thought, the pattern of mind, the pattern of humanity. It was as if the entire species had compressed their essence, their every emotion, memory, struggle, and act of defiance, into a single, immortal song, and encoded it into the universe itself. The Council fleets watched, helpless, as their instruments failed, their systems completely overwhelmed by the sheer resonance. And then, within the storm of light and sound, forms began to appear. Not physical, not flesh and bone, but patterns of pure energy, shaped like beings, luminous and shifting, human silhouettes made of pure vibration. They were not ghosts. They were not gods. They were the echo of a civilization that had learned to transcend through resonance, to become one with the very fabric of sound. The galaxy hadn't rediscovered humans. The galaxy had awakened them. As the station reached critical energy, a final note rang out, pure, infinite, indescribable. It resonated through every living and artificial mind in the galaxy, leaving behind a single, undeniable truth. Humanity was not gone. They had only changed their form. The fleets fled as the neutron star imploded, not into a black hole, but into a sphere of radiant energy, pulsing with impossible life. And then, from that light, came a voice, not spoken, not heard, but felt deep within the core of every being. It was not a message of war. It was a song of remembrance, a melody that carried one simple meaning across the stars. We are still here. With that, the station vanished, leaving only the resonance, a steady, cosmic rhythm echoing across space, as if the universe itself had finally begun to breathe to the beat of human music. The silence that followed was not empty. It was waiting. Because somewhere, in that shimmering hum of starlight and sound, something vast had stirred. and the galaxy had only just begun to listen. For the first time in all of recorded history, the galaxy fell silent. I don't mean the usual quiet of deep space, that cold vacuum between the stars. No, this was a stillness with weight, the kind of silence that comes after a revelation that shatters everything you thought you knew. Every single world, every space station, every mind, whether it was made of flesh and bone or wires and code, had felt the echo, the human sound. It had passed through all of them, leaving a mark that could never be erased. But this silence wasn't peaceful. It was pure awe, mixed with a healthy dose of terror. Across the great council worlds, panic erupted like a supernova. The fleets that managed to survive the event limped back to their star bases, their crews half mad, their sensors fried beyond repair. They were haunted by vibrations that still seemed to echo deep inside their bones, a ghost frequency they could never tune out. The Council, in its infinite wisdom, or what was left of it, tried to regain control. They put out a statement, calling the event a localized resonance collapse, a cosmic hiccup. But the galaxy knew better. Everyone knew better. Even the stars themselves seemed to pulse differently now. Something fundamental had changed in the very fabric of the universe. Every scientific measurement, from gravitational constants to the flux of dark energy, even the decay rates of subatomic particles, showed tiny, subtle variations. It was as if the universe had retuned itself, shifting its rhythm to a new, unfamiliar beat. And buried deep within this new harmony was a pattern, a repeating cadence woven into the cosmic background radiation itself. It was soft, slow, eternal. It was a heartbeat. They said that if you stood on the surface of a quiet moon, far from the noise of civilization, and just listened, truly listened, to the whisper of the solar winds, you could still hear it. Faint, distant, but unmistakably human. The greatest minds of the galaxy, the scholars and scientists, debated endlessly. What was the human sound? A superweapon of unimaginable power? Or was it some kind of evolution, a grand ascension? Had humanity become gods, or were they simply gone? No one could agree, and no one ever would. But the effects of their return, or whatever it truly was, were undeniable. Species that had never known emotion, that had existed for eons in a state of pure logic, suddenly began to create art. Civilizations that had prided themselves on cold precision started to have dreams for the first time. Entire worlds, once dedicated only to ruthless efficiency, found themselves building strange new contraptions, musical instruments. They were trying to recreate this alien concept of music. It spread like wildfire. Melodies bloomed from frozen ice worlds and scorched desert cities, from the swirling atmospheres of gas giants and the sterile corridors of floating colonies. New symphonies echoed across alien skies. For the first time in galactic history, billions of different species, from trillions of different worlds, felt something together, in perfect unison. It was wonder. The universe had started to sing again. And in the quiet corners of this strange new age, stories began to surface. Whispers of voices heard within the resonance, of secrets hidden in the harmonics of creation. Miners working on the razor's edge of black holes claimed they heard entire choruses rising from beyond the event horizon. Explorers charting the vast empty void between galaxies reported seeing rhythmic flashes of light among long-dead star clusters. The rumor took on a name, whispered only in reverence: the Choir of Sol. Some believed the humans had become pure energy, existing beyond physical form, their consciousness traveling through the frequencies of existence itself. Others claimed they had merged with the very fabric of space-time, subtly guiding the galaxy, teaching it how to feel. Whatever the truth was, one fact remained. The human sound was no longer contained. It had become the pulse of creation. The old council, desperate to cling to their fading power, decided to launch one final desperate project. A weapon. a vast, resonant engine designed to cancel out the frequency, to silence the human heartbeat once and for all. They called it the null engine, a machine theoretically capable of generating an inverse waveform powerful enough to silence the very hum of the universe. It was their greatest achievement, and their greatest folly. When they activated it, the null engine didn't silence the sound, it amplified it. The machine's colossal output folded in on itself, turning into a perfect harmonic mirror. The human sound was reflected, focused, and surged back through subspace in a wave of pure, unfiltered resonance. It swept across the entire galaxy in seconds. Worlds quaked, stars pulsed, shining brighter than they ever had before. And then, for one fleeting, eternal moment, every single mind, every living, thinking entity in the galaxy shared the exact same vision. A vast expanse of brilliant light, a planet of swirling blue and white, oceans that stretched to the horizon, clouds glowing with golden light, and winds that carried the impossible sounds of laughter and song. And standing beneath those skies were figures, familiar, radiant, human. Not as beings of flesh, but as pure light woven into the fabric of reality itself. They gazed out at the stars they had once struggled to reach, and they smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph or conquest. It was a smile of pure understanding. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had transcended. They had become the music of the universe. The vision faded, and silence returned once more. But this time, the silence was different. It wasn't born of fear or loss. It was reverence. It was the sacred pause that follows a perfect symphony, the quiet anticipation before the encore. In the cycles that followed, the council disbanded. Empires fell, not in wars or revolutions, but in quiet reflection. The galaxy learned humility, and then, slowly, it learned hope. And on the once forbidden planet of Earth, long abandoned and forgotten, something stirred beneath the soil. The winds whistled through the ruins of ancient cities, carrying faint, new harmonies. The very air seemed to hum with a quiet energy. Then, a sound emerged, gentle, faint, and utterly new. It wasn't coming from a machine or an old recording. It was coming from life. Somewhere, in the shadow of a shattered skyline, something was singing. No one knew what it was. A new species, maybe, born from the ashes of what humanity had left behind. Or perhaps something else. Something returning. The stars in the sky above flickered, as if they were keeping time. The great heartbeat of the cosmos slowed, paused, and then, once again, began to rise, steady, powerful, infinite. And in that rhythm, the galaxy finally understood the truth. Humans had given the universe their first and last great gift. It wasn't technology, or power, or empire. It was a way to feel. Music had always been the language of creation. They had simply remembered the words. And now, in the silence that followed, the universe waited, listening, yearning, for the next note to begin. Because somewhere, beyond the edge of space and time, a new melody was building. The song of humanity wasn't over. It was just tuning up for the next verse. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through the cosmos, don't forget to like, subscribe,